Hi, I'm Kathleen Q with Nebraska Extension. Today we're talking about growing garlic. If you've ever grown garlic before, you know that in the springtime, when you're looking at all the garden centers, garlic is readily found. You can find it easily for planting. But what you may not know is that garlic that's grown in fall, so fall planted garlic, actually is healthier and it actually produces bigger bulbs than it does if it's spring planted. So even though it's October, it may seem like things are wrapping up, you can actually plant garlic now and get some great garlic to enjoy next summer. When choosing a site for growing garlic, you're going to want a site that has at least 6 hours of direct, uninterrupted sunlight during the course of the day. It can be more than 6 hours, but if it's less than 6 hours, you're not going to get as good production as you'd like to have. You'll also want a site that has well-draining soil. So if it's a heavy, dense clay that you're growing it in, what bulbs will do is rot. So you'll definitely want to amend that soil with compost to really loosen things up. The other thing to keep in mind is that if you're growing in sandy soils are a little bit problematic for garlic as well, mostly because garlic is a heavy nutrient-needing plant. And so if you don't have some of that organic matter worked into it to provide those nutrients to plants, you're not going to get as good production as well. So either way, clay or sand, you're going to want to work in some organic matter like compost, leaf mold, something like that, in order to loosen that soil up to plant these guys. Now when you're choosing garlic varieties to grow, the first thing I want to remind you is don't go to the grocery store and purchase one of these for planting in the garden. The reason you don't want this is because a lot of times this product that you're purchasing has been treated with an anti-sprouting product, and that keeps it from sprouting while it's in the grocery store and while it's on your pantry shelf. But this is something that you don't want to use because it's not going to do as well. From there, we know that garlic is broadly divided into soft neck varieties and hard neck varieties. Soft neck varieties are those that we often see braided into chains, and you'll see those a lot in like the southwest part of the country. And that has a very short shelf life. So that really isn't the one that we're going to be talking about growing today. We're going to be talking about the hard neck varieties. Now, granted, you can't necessarily put those into braids, but they're called hard neck because there's a central stem through it that's really quite stiff, really quite hard. And those hard neck varieties are really, really good at being able to store them for long periods of time. So we're going to talk about mostly hard neck varieties to grow. And when you're looking at varieties, the flavor range is just phenomenal. So you can get buttery flavored garlic, you can get mild, you can get fiery, and all of those have a range of flavors that are really culinary possibilities, something that you can really get into, and it does a lot of good for your cooking skills. And when you're looking at varieties to grow, there's a plethora of types to grow out there. They can be things with really fun names. So there's Romanian white, and there's Russian red, and what are some other varieties that you can grow that all have some unique flavors associated with them, but all of them are hard neck varieties. Okay. Now when we're talking about growing garlic, so this is a garlic head, all right? And so you're actually breaking it apart and putting in individual cloves into the soil. So the bigger the clove, the larger the head will be the result. So this is something that if you're saving these cloves from one year to the next for replanting, the temptation is there to eat all the big ones, because those are really convenient to do, and save the tiny ones for replanting next fall. The problem with that is, again, the larger the clove, the larger the head. So you'll actually want to be saving back some of the larger cloves when you plant these next fall. When you're looking at site preparation, you want to make sure the soil is very nice, very workable, very friable. And then at that point, you want to start digging your holes. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. You can dig a trench in the ground, or you can use a dibble and do individual holes. But you'll want to plant each one of these about 4 inches deep and 6 inches apart. 6 inches apart allows individual bulbs to fully develop without competing with their neighbor. When you're planting these guys, you want the flat side down. So this is called the basal plate. This is how it comes off of the clove. So it's actually associated like this. These are all basal plates towards the bottom. And when you break those off, and this is another thing to remember, you really don't want to break the head apart until you're ready to plant. The reason for that is these papery sheaths on here help to keep the clove hydrated. It helps retain moisture levels. And so if you're breaking these apart too soon, this clove can actually shrink down some, and that's going to affect the ability of it to do well. So break these apart when you're ready to plant. The basal plate goes down to the bottom of the hole. This point that's on the end goes upward. So it faces skyward, where this goes downward. And again, 4 inches down and about 6 inches apart. Now once those are planted, you can go ahead and put the soil back in place, water it in well, and the very first thing that this is going to do when it's set into the ground is this clove is going to put out roots. And you want it to do that because what's going to happen here is that those roots are going to further help keep this clove hydrated through the growing season, through the winter, all that time period. Now what may happen is that you'll get some green growth yet this fall. And if you have that, that's not a concern. You don't want to remove it. You want to leave it in place. And that was actually something that will help nourish the plant through the winter months. So you can definitely leave this green growth in place. When I was looking, this is the garlic out of my garden, and when I was looking for this yesterday, my dog Boston was going out and helping me as I was in the garden, and he actually found my patch of garlic before I did, and I knew that because I could smell the garlic. And if you were in the studio right now with me, you would know that it really smells like garlic in here just from having these plants in here. So it's amazing how much fragrance that they give off when you're doing this. The other thing to keep in mind is that next year you may have a seed stalk come up out of the clump. And if you see something like that, you'll want to snap that off. The reason for that is that if the plant puts a lot of energy into developing sets from that, then it's going to take away from the bulb size. So definitely you'll want to go ahead and snap those off. The good news is that if you snap it off when it's relatively small, it's edible. And so you can actually put it in dishes where a garlic flavor is desired. Then next spring, this growth is going to resume in earnest. And the time to harvest is when this foliage dies back by 1/2. So when the foliage is dead by 1/2, then it's time to go ahead and dig up and see what kind of cloves and heads that you have in there. So remember, the largest cloves make the largest heads of garlic, that you can save some of these back for next year in order to plant again in the fall, and then you'll have more of the same things growing. As a final thing, you're going to want to go ahead and mulch these guys, okay? And what you use is entirely up to you. This is wheat straw right here, and you can see that this is a seed head from the wheat straw, and so sometimes you can see occasionally some wheat plants coming up from wheat straw, but that's a good mulch to use. Or you can use something like wood chips, and that's okay to use as well. A lot of people think that the use of mulches is to keep the ground cooler or warmer, depending on that. But really what we're doing is we're keeping things from having to go through the great vastness of temperature ranges that can occur in the Midwest. And so this is actually an insulation layer against those really wild temperature fluctuations that can occur. So that's the final step, is that mulching that you'll do with your garlic. So that in essence is how to grow it. And I hope that you find that it's really quite easy, and really there's nothing to get between you and growing garlic except getting out those garden gloves. For Nebraska Extension, I'm Kathleen Q.